I mean, I think we all experience that, whether we're a teacher, a professor in tech service, an extension. But probably the worst thing that we can do is come in and say, well, you just automatically say, this is what you should do. It's like, tell me about your process. Tell me about your goals. What is your goal for this product? Or what is your goal for your dairy? What are your goals for raising these cattle? What are your goals for the quality of the product you're producing? So understand what your client or your student or your extension customer really are what their goals are and what motivates them. And I think that is when you can begin to make that connection. You know, it's not a game, it's not a method, it's just showing genuine care about what their goals are and saying, okay, how can we get to that?
Welcome to MeatsPad. In collaboration with the American Meat Science Association, it's a platform dedicated to share breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the global meat industry. On each episode, you'll have the opportunity to listen and learn from meat specialists and professionals about the whole meat industry. This podcast is brought to you by the U.S. Meat Export Federation, Ultrasource, equipment and supplies for the meat and food industry, Viscofan collagen casings, the best alternative to animal gut casings for a better taste and sustainable sausage making.
Hello, me folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. My name is Francisco Najar, and we continue our RMC series. Last year, we've been kind of going back and forth with some emails, and last year we wanted to visit with our guest today. And I'm glad that we're not leaving Oklahoma City this week without sitting down with Dr. Stephen Lonergan. Welcome to MeatsPad.
Thanks a lot, Francisco.
We're talking about you are a moral professor, someone that for a lot of us, a lot of the research and all of the papers that we get to do lead review on or read for just getting more in-depth meat science education. And I have a topic that we were discussing, how to apply the fundamentals or / basic research or science in general to solve common issues, not only in the U.S., but also like around the world in the global meat industry. And I think that could be the very, very first question about your experience. I know you had some experience with FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, and I think we can start this podcast that way.
Sure, we can sure start out that way. At Iowa State University and our College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, we have a program that's really used that we select the most elite students that we can across the college. And after a semester of preparing and developing some background information, we go to Rome for a month, and we work with our colleagues at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, and that's headquartered there. And every year there may be a different type of project. The FAO has a food nutrient database, for example, about 10 or 12 years ago, we discovered there was very, very little information about meat nutrients in their database. And so we said, how about we help you out with that? So our students worked very hard, and there's about 180 beef entries and over 200 pork entries in their database now because of our Iowa State students who scoured the literature and helped them have that information available for people across the world, and not just this is pork composition, but this is pork composition from this breed of pig that fed this way, and really diving deep into those kinds of and what are the fatty acid profiles, et cetera. We had students work on projects for colleagues at FAO that have generated information about what's the prospects for cell-based meat in the world, and that team worked in 2019. What's the prospect for using insects for food and feed? And our students have worked really closely with those colleagues and published papers and posters and generated information that FAO uses. FAO is a really complex and big organization, and we've helped and we've been the beneficiaries of being able to spend time with them to help them address their issues. Probably one of the biggest problems or topics that we keep coming back to is animal genetic diversity and biodiversity and conservation of what's called either local or local breeds, small breeds, minor breeds that serve in small areas or individual countries and have really diverse functions. Today in commercial agriculture, we select cattle to produce milk or to produce meat. In a lot of smaller countries, they have breeds that do all of those things and maybe even draft, or for example. So those are the kinds of things that really on a micro level we're really helping and interacting with colleagues at Food and Agriculture Organization. And that's a really nice opportunity for our students. So it's a new opportunity for our students to learn how animal technology or animal science or meat science or maybe some other agriculture topic can be applied to solve bigger problems. Just last year, we had a team that worked very closely to evaluate the possibilities of how gene editing might help in the world of making sure we can produce more efficiently produce safe food and protect the food supply. And of course, there's all kinds of other regulatory issues with that. And we had another team that worked on how can we help producers and, for lack of a better word, extension people in smaller countries develop phenotypes for their livestock so they can better understand their management practices. So again, just how and in this project, it's not always about livestock, but when we're involved, it is. But how can we use information to help people solve problems in different parts of the world?
I guess it's interesting. I have a couple questions
Sure.
following on that, and I guess the first one would be, how do you let's say, I mean, you can name a country. I'm sure a lot of countries you've been helping too, but those solutions, as you mentioned, local breeds, they work very well in their environment. In Puerto Rico, there's you probably know about this, the breed in Puerto Rico that it's a Bos Taurus, but
The Senepols?
Senepol.
Yeah.
And we can use that example,
Yeah.
how the Senepol, how they genetically modify to have the hair, short hair, right? I don't know if you know the story,
Yeah.
but it's. Yeah, I think that could be an example.
It's the slick gene.
Yes. With someone from Uruguay that spent there a lot of time, and I got the opportunity to visit them. We do a lot of things with Puerto Rico, helping them the meat industry there, and you get to know these stories. But you see, and I was telling you, you see how it turned out, but to become or to transform everything. To help the local community, you had to develop a genetics program. You had to know, and it's interesting. And I ask you because culturally, I mean, even with folks here in the U.S. in America, sometimes it's difficult because you have within the same country, different universities have different methodologies, right? And I cannot imagine combining that plus different countries, different cultures, different language. And so maybe you can tell me a little bit of your experience on that.
Sure. So in our experience with FAO, it's really been at the level in Rome. So we have not had the opportunity to work directly with people in countries. But you're absolutely right. Working with producers in every different venue, there has to be trust, there has to be competency, there has to be a relationship, and so no matter whether I would walk to a farm in Iowa where I grew up and where I'm a faculty member, or walk into, I need that trust, I need that competency, I need a relationship to be able to say, tell me about your production. What are you seeing? What are your challenges? And really, when it comes down to is identifying those challenges, starts with good communication, and whether it's in a high-income country and at a commercial farm or a very small farm in in sub-Saharan Africa or somewhere in Asia, you have to have good communication and trust, competency, and a relationship to really understand what the issues are. So sometimes at that level, as scientists and educators, we have to be better listeners than teachers.
Since 1883, Ultrasource has been a trusted supplier to the food industry. Ultrasource provides superior kill floor, processing, packaging, and labeling equipment and operational supplies.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's hard. I mean we were talking. I mean, I'm repeating myself quite a bit, but that communication. I mean, in this example of like this week here, the professor and the grad student, the dad and the son or the daughter. I mean, that communication is very important. And I guess it's boring, but you have to repeat yourself how to better communicate. Can be with your local community, with your listenership, and I guess the other question that I had is when you recommend something, and you know that you have to go through this to be better off, but sometimes the people receiving that information, they don't think that way,
right.
And just by, as you said, there's maybe another way to communicate the same thing so that they can be more, I don't know, attentive or more willing to accept the change, because that's hard. I mean, especially that with producers that have been doing that way for 20, 30 years, and you come up with, oh, okay, you got to do this and change. Like, no, we're not going to do that. Even though it can be, it's good for them, but I encounter this all the time, and you can extrapolate it in a kill floor, or you can extrapolate it in value-added products. I don't know. It's funny.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing your experiences, because I mean, I think we all experience that, whether we're a teacher, a professor, in tech service, an extension. But probably the worst thing that we can do is come in and say, well, you just automatically say, this is what you should do. It's like, tell me about your process. Tell me about your goals. What is your goal for this product, or what is your goal for your dairy? And I'm not a dairy expert, so what are your goals for raising these cattle? What are your goals for the quality of the product you're producing? So understand what your client or your student or your extension customer really are what their goals are and what motivates them. And I think that is when you can begin to make that connection. And it's not, it's not a game. It's not a method. It's just showing genuine care about what their goals are and saying, okay, how can we get to that? So usually for me, it's like asking a lot of different questions. It's not unlike, I guess in the classroom with me, with undergraduates, I'm the professor, I'm in charge, you're going to learn this stuff or you'll get a bad grade. But you don't want to make it that transactional. You want to make it, so what motivates you? Why are you here? Why do you want to be here? What can we do together and how can we get there? I challenge my students a lot, and I think they have to study in different ways than they have, especially with my sophomore class. But I think that building that trust and having a relationship is a really important part of people opening up to maybe what your recommendation might be, or maybe just leading them to that conclusion. I mean, it can be really hard in a classroom and sometimes I really fail at this, to ask a question and just wait for the answer. It's like, so what is the biggest challenge for something? Just sit there and wait. But you have to wait, and then okay, and then maybe ask a follow-up question. And so why is that, and how can that be? And so you let them start to bring their own experiences to the learning process as well. And I think that applies in so many different venues where we're charged with teaching and learning and learning together with others.
That's awesome, and I think we were right on on this topic, and I asked you before we started recording. So I want you to tell our audience, to our listenership, about some of the importance of knowing the fundamentals in meat science, and how to repeat that, or even challenge that science that was there. I will tell you an example with Dr. Gerard that we send our regards. Didn't come this year. Maybe next year we'll get him again and sit down with him. But it's a lot of the applied research started with basic research, or always, I guess. I mean, not sometimes, but how's that? I would like to know from you, how's that experience? Perhaps selecting even the research, right? There's
Sure.
a lot of lines that you can choose, but I guess we can.
So I think I consider myself an applied scientist because I work on applied questions. How can we make meat more tender? How can we work with my colleagues to understand how we can improve growth performance? What is the consequence of some nutritional intervention on growth performance and ultimately meat quality? I mean, we don't need to, but so those are I consider those to be pretty applied questions. And the way that we go about and the tools that we use to answer those questions might be a scale. It might be, measuring the feed intake, and so another scale in the feeder, or some technology that does, individual feed intake or something along those lines. It might be some other kind of camera that we're getting phenotype from how livestock move, or what their frame is, or what their soundness is. But those are all tools that we use, and then we have data. And really think about that. Think about this in just so those are tools that we're using to answer a question. And I had a mentor early in my career who quoted one of his mentors. I don't know if he will ever listen to this or not, but he always said that science begins with a question. Technology begins with a task. So if we are scientists and we build a question, how does this happen? What are the consequences of this? How can we make products safer? Then we have a question, but now we have a task. How do we address that question? Can we learn? Can we develop technology to learn a deeper way to understand that scientific problem or scientific question? So I think that I understand that that's a very common way to look at it, and I know that I even do it that way. But I would like to challenge that we even say that, or do we do applied research, or do we do basic research? I mean, I think we're always trying to answer questions, and that's how we should kind of characterize it. Iowa State University is a university of science and technology, and I often talk to my students about that. So what does that mean? Science is, pursuit of knowledge and answering questions, and technology, again, is developing ways to do that. So which comes first, the question or the technology, or is it a circle? And in my opinion, and actually I've thought about this a lot, but I think learning comes first. So it's not science that comes first. It's not basic science that comes first, or applied science that comes first. It's learning. And that's being observant and going, why did that happen? If you're a herdsman and you notice that one cow responds differently, or, one cow is sick and the other cow is not, or, just something very simple. Or if you were looking at something in a feedlot and one whole pen is reacting differently to another pen, and it's super hot that day. It's like, well, where did they come from, and what are their genetics? And so being observant and of the world around you, actually, and being a learner. As meat scientists, we might look at it and go, look at something. It's like, why on this day did we have all this purge problem in these pork loins, and on another day we didn't? So let's start building a question and being observant and building those questions. So I guess that's, to me, formulating the question first and then refining that question, building a hypothesis, and coming up with a way to answer that.
I'm really excited about this, and I guess I was going to ask you what's the secret to keep pushing, and I guess you answered some of that by being observant and by stepping back, and sometimes we're not patient enough to say, okay, I need to observe before we even conduct a whole experiment. Yeah, and sometimes and I guess I'm sure because of your experience, your years, you've seen that. But for young people, like sometimes we want to act,
right.
and like, oh, you're gonna be back in a couple of months saying, no, I should have observed better. I should have waited longer to act.
I think that's fair. I think that's a good characterization that you propose, because it's one of the things that we often talk about in the scientific process is like, do I have some preliminary data or some other observations? I saw this once, but do I see it again before I really pursue it? When we go after grants from whomever, a company, the government, a commodity agency, we have to show that we have confidence that this phenomenon or this problem is real. So I think we have to learn in that learning process to understand the data. What are the data, and try to figure out what the data are telling us, and remove the bias that we think we might have brought to the table. We might think, oh, well, I know that when I age this beef, it's going to get more tender. And then I do the experiment and it didn't get more tender. I go, why is that? Weird. Oh, it just must be wrong. No, we can't think about that. Let's try it again, but let's try to figure out what's happening. So maybe if I go back to a different mentor, Muhammad Kamari, who is recognized today, as a matter of fact, he would say, so why did that happen? I think he was somebody who I will use him as an example. He, in collaboration with people at Kansas State University, were early on trying to figure out why Bos Indicus cattle with high percentage of Bos Indicus breeding tended to produce tougher beef. And this is in the early 90s, and there's so there's, okay, well, these, and they kind of knew it happened. It's just tougher beef, so they kind of knew it happened, but it's like, so what are the things that could have affected that? Well, what's the pH? Well, that's not much different. How about the sarcomere length? Well, that's not very much different. Oh, it's going to be the marbling. Well, that's not very much different. What about, and so they just kind of go on. Ultimately, they discovered, as we all know now, that it was Muhammad Kamari, they were very interested in this aging process, and they recognized that the beef from the Bos Indicus cattle didn't age at the same rate, and maybe not to the same extent as beef from Bos Taurus cattle. So that's an example. They made an observation. They said, so why could that be? And you can apply that to lots of other things. But that's a really good example right there of, okay, this happens. It happens a lot. How can we address this problem? And they asked several, oh, I bet it's connective tissue. Well, no, that's not it. Oh, I bet it's sarcomere. Well, that's not it. So they ultimately were able to answer the question because they believed the data and they were persistent in addressing it. And, today we understand that phenomenon and understand a lot of different things about that. But I think that just shows, being observant, coming up with a good question, and a plan to try to answer the question.
An industry practice, and I'm just quoting what you said, sometimes if you go back and see who proposed this practice, was someone who observed a lot and did a lot of research on that. So last question for you, Dr. Lonergan. What has been your best reward as a professor?
Oh, that's actually a pretty easy question. And I will say that I always I really enjoyed time in the lab. I am one of those professors that's in the lab quite a bit still. And I like learning new technologies and new ways to answer questions. And I find that very motivating. But easily the most motivating and rewarding experiences is working with students that on their own come up with that, I have a question and I know how I'm going to answer it or address it, maybe not answer it. But so watching students go through that process and the very first time and it could be in the lab, running a Western blot or some enzyme assay. It could be in the packing plant. It could be in the meat lab downstairs, or it might just be driving down the road and what about? But that's really watching young people kind of develop as scientists and as professionals, and really see how that really advances our field of meat science and agriculture, but also helps them advance in their lives. And I think that's the really there's a quote engraved in a building at Iowa State University. It says from a very early graduate of Iowa State. He said, "We come to college not alone to learn how to make a living, but to learn to live life." And I think that's the most rewarding thing for me, to be involved with young people that are learning to live life.
What a good way to wrap it up. Thank you, Dr. Lonergan, for being here today. I hope it's not the first one or the last one. We got to do more of this, and hopefully maybe before next RMC, we can sit down about a specific topic on the numerous research and current research that you're working on.
That'd be fun.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.